Throughout history, empires have risen through conquest, strategy, and sheer force of will, but almost none of them fell because a stronger enemy showed up at the gates. No, the real killer was always closer, standing right beside the throne, smiling, waiting. This is the story of the betrayals that brought down the mightiest civilizations the world has ever seen. And trust me, some of these will make your skin crawl. Let's start with the one that basically invented political backstabbing. Rome, 44 BC. Julius Caesar had just been declared dictator for life. He had crushed his rivals in a brutal civil war, expanded Roman territory across Gaul, and returned to Rome as the most powerful man on earth. The Senate feared him, the people loved him, and his closest allies were already sharpening their knives. On the morning of March 15th, the Ides of March, Caesar walked into the Senate chamber. He had been warned. A soothsayer had told him to beware this exact day. His wife Calpurnia had begged him not to go after dreaming of his death. But Caesar dismissed it all. He trusted the men around him. That was his fatal mistake. As he took his seat, a group of senators surrounded him. 60 conspirators in total, but around 20 actually struck. The first blade came from Servilius Casca, then another, and another. Caesar fought back at first, but when he saw Marcus Brutus among the attackers, the man he had mentored, protected, possibly even loved like a son, he reportedly pulled his toga over his face and stopped resisting. 23 stab wounds. The most powerful man in the ancient world, bleeding out on the marble floor of the very institution he had dominated. The conspirators claimed they were saving the Republic. Instead, they destroyed it. Caesar's assassination triggered another devastating civil war that eventually ended the Roman Republic forever and gave rise to the Roman Empire under Augustus. The men who killed Caesar to preserve freedom accidentally created the very thing they feared most. But Rome's betrayal problem was far from over. If Caesar's murder was a single, devastating blow, what came centuries later was a slow, agonizing rot from the inside. By the 4th and 5th centuries AD, the Roman Empire had become a machine that manufactured traitors. Emperors were assassinated by their own Praetorian Guard so frequently that the bodyguards became more dangerous than any barbarian horde. At one point, the Praetorians literally auctioned off the title of emperor to the highest bidder. Didius Julianus bought the throne in 193 AD for the equivalent of millions. He lasted 66 days before being executed. But the betrayal that truly sealed Rome's fate came from a man named Flavius Stilicho. He was a half-Vandal general who had become the most effective military commander the Western Empire had. He defeated Gothic invasions, held the borders together, and essentially kept the empire functioning while weak emperors sat on the throne. So naturally, they killed him. In 408 AD, Emperor Honorius, convinced by jealous court advisors that Stilicho was plotting to seize power, had him arrested and executed. The man who had been holding the empire together was gone. Within 2 years, Alaric and his Visigoths sacked Rome for the first time in 800 years. The empire didn't fall because the barbarians were unstoppable. It fell because Rome destroyed the one man capable of stopping them. And halfway across the world, another empire was learning the exact same lesson, the hard way. The Mongol Empire under Genghis Khan was the largest contiguous land empire in human history. At its peak, it stretched from Korea to Hungary. Genghis Khan built it through military genius, strict loyalty codes, and an absolute intolerance for betrayal. Ironically, it was betrayal that would eventually shatter his legacy into pieces. After Genghis Khan's death in 1227, his empire was divided among his sons and grandsons. For a while, the system worked, but by the 1260s, the family had turned on itself, completely. The breaking point came with the Toluid Civil War. Kublai Khan and his brother Arikboke both claimed the title of Great Khan. This wasn't some diplomatic disagreement. This was full-scale war between grandsons of the same legendary conqueror, each commanding massive armies of Mongol warriors against each other. Kublai eventually won, but the damage was catastrophic. The four khanates that made up the empire began operating independently. Cousin fought cousin. Alliance after alliance shattered. The Golden Horde in Russia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, they all drifted apart, weakened by internal conflict. The empire that had conquered half the known world didn't fall to any outside force. It was dismantled by the very bloodline that built it. Brothers, cousins, and nephews tearing each other apart over a throne their grandfather had forged through unity. Genghis Khan once said that one arrow alone can be easily broken, but many arrows together are indestructible. His descendants proved him right by doing the exact opposite. But if you think family betrayal couldn't get any darker than that, wait until you hear what happened in the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire perfected something truly horrifying. They turned betrayal into official government policy. When Sultan Mehmed II conquered Constantinople in 1453 and ended the Byzantine Empire, he also formalized a practice known as fratricide law. Upon ascending the throne, a new sultan was expected, even legally encouraged, to execute all of his brothers, every single one. The logic was brutally simple. Multiple princes meant succession wars. Succession wars meant a weakened empire, so eliminate the competition permanently. Sultan Mehmed III took this to its extreme in 1595. On the day of his coronation, he had 19 of his own brothers strangled with silk cords. 19. Some of them were still children. The executioners were deaf mutes, specifically chosen because they couldn't hear the screams or speak about what they had done. Eventually, the Ottomans abandoned outright fratricide and replaced it with the cafes, or cage system. Princes were locked away in a secluded section of the palace for their entire lives, kept alive but completely isolated from the outside world. Some spent decades in confinement. When they finally emerged to take the throne, many were mentally shattered, utterly unprepared to rule. Sultan Ibrahim, known as Ibrahim the Mad, spent 22 years in the cafes before becoming sultan in 1640. He was so traumatized that he initially refused to open the door, convinced it was a trick to murder him. His reign was a disaster of paranoia and erratic decisions that nearly brought the empire to its knees. The Ottomans created a system designed to prevent betrayal, and that system itself became the ultimate betrayal of their own future. They sacrificed the mental health and capability of their rulers on the altar of political stability, and in the end, they got neither stability nor capable rulers. But the Ottomans lasted 6 centuries despite all this. Some empires weren't so lucky. Some were destroyed by a single act of treachery in a single afternoon. The Aztec Empire was one of the most powerful civilizations in the Americas. Tenochtitlan, their capital, was a marvel of engineering built on a lake with causeways, aqueducts, and massive pyramids. When the Spanish first saw it in 1519, they compared it to Venice. Some said it was more beautiful than any city in Europe, and it was all brought down by betrayal on multiple levels. When Hernán Cortés arrived with fewer than 600 soldiers, the Aztecs could have crushed him immediately. Emperor Moctezuma II commanded an army of hundreds of thousands, but Moctezuma hesitated. He welcomed Cortés into the capital, offered him gifts, and treated him as a guest. Some historians believe Moctezuma thought Cortés might be connected to the god Quetzalcoatl. Others argue he was simply playing a diplomatic game, trying to assess the threat before acting. Either way, that hesitation was fatal, but it wasn't just Moctezuma's indecision that doomed the Aztecs. Cortés exploited something far more devastating. He turned the Aztec Empire's own subjects against it. The Tlaxcalans, Totonacs, and other peoples who had been conquered, taxed, and forced to provide human sacrifices by the Aztecs joined the Spanish in massive numbers. By the time Cortés marched on Tenochtitlan for the final siege in 1521, his army included tens of thousands of indigenous allies who wanted the Aztec Empire destroyed. The empire fell not because of Spanish military superiority alone. It fell because generations of brutal domination had created an army of resentful subjects who were willing to side with a foreign invader just to see their oppressors brought down. The Aztecs were betrayed by the very people they had conquered. And the Tlaxcalans and others who helped the Spanish would soon discover that their new allies had no intention of sharing power either. One betrayal simply led to another. This pattern repeats across history with almost mechanical precision. And nowhere was it more dramatic than in the empire that once controlled a quarter of the entire planet. The British Empire's grip on India, its most valuable colony, was shaken to its core by the Indian Rebellion of 1857. And it began with a betrayal of trust so tone-deaf it almost defies belief. The East India Company had recruited tens of thousands of Indian soldiers, called sepoys, to fight in their armies. These men were loyal, disciplined, and effective, but the company treated their cultural and religious beliefs with staggering contempt. The final spark came with the introduction of the new Enfield rifle. To load it, soldiers had to bite open a greased cartridge. Rumors spread that the grease was made from cow and pig fat, offensive to both Hindu and Muslim soldiers. When sepoys at Meerut refused to use the cartridges, 85 of them were publicly stripped of their uniforms, shackled in irons, and sentenced to 10 years of hard labor in front of their own comrades. The next day, the remaining sepoys rose up, killed their British officers, and marched on Delhi. The rebellion spread across northern India like wildfire. For months, the British nearly lost control of the subcontinent entirely. The company had betrayed the basic dignity of the very men they depended on to maintain their empire. And when those men turned, the consequences were catastrophic. The rebellion was eventually crushed with extreme brutality, but the East India Company was dissolved. The British Crown took direct control, but the seeds of Indian independence had been planted in blood. An empire that ruled through the labor and sacrifice of its subjects discovered what happens when you betray the people holding your sword. Every single one of these empires shared the same fatal flaw. They believed they were too powerful to be destroyed from within. Caesar trusted his senators. Rome trusted its guards. The Mongols trusted their bloodline. The Ottomans trusted their system. The Aztecs trusted their dominance. The British trusted their subjects' obedience. All of them were wrong. The uncomfortable truth is that empires don't fall from the outside. They crack from within, every time. A general executed out of jealousy. A brother murdered for the throne. An ally ignored until they become an enemy. A soldier humiliated until he picks up his rifle and points it the other direction. Betrayal isn't some rare catastrophe that strikes unlucky civilizations. It's the default ending. It's how power works. The very systems that build empires, hierarchy, control, domination, are the same systems that create the resentment, rivalry, and desperation that tear them apart. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but the pattern of betrayal is so consistent across thousands of years and every continent on Earth that it might as well be a law of nature. Build an empire on the backs of others, and eventually those backs will straighten. Trust no one, and eventually no one will be trustworthy. Concentrate all power in one place, and everyone around you has a reason to take it. The next empire that falls will fall the same way, and it probably already has the traitor standing right beside the throne, smiling, waiting. Thanks for watching, and make sure to check the channel for more videos like this one.